I'm Ayo Makinde. Welcome to Sunrise this beautiful Saturday morning. Well, as you can see again, I'm home alone. But no. You know, everyone needs a rest, a bit of a rest here and there from time to time. So, well, it's a privilege to have you with us this morning. Help to make some sense of your Saturday morning. Again, I say my name is Ayo Makinde. You're welcome to the program. Let me begin on a rather somber note, something that's been on for a while, and that is the issue of the flooding. You, of course, saw the report that Channels Television, the special report that Channels Television did, which correspondent Ayola Kasim went to a number of states, including Benue states, to cover you know, the flooding, the effects of climate change, and all those other issues and environmental issues that she's been specialist at for a number of years in our in this state, in this channel, on Channels Television. So that's something that I think we should talk about. We'll speak a lot more about that this morning, and that is the the state of mind of the flood victims today. You know, if you've been through a bit of a trauma, you would understand that it's not so easy to come back from, right? Even if you haven't, just imagine that someone has been living a certain kind of life, and for whatever reason, that life of theirs changes, and they're never going to come back to that level of life again. Not that life, even if it's going to be better or worse, the sentimental attachments that they had to some things, or to even to the home, the fact that I'm going home, the comfort of going back home, they're never going to have that again the way they had it before the flooding. So even if the floods abate, how long will it take for them to go back to that same house? How are they going to recover back the things that they had at the time before the flooding? What's the mind? What's the state of their minds now? What's the state of their mental health right now? Again, as I said earlier in the week, depending on the data you're looking at, between 50 and 70 million Nigerians are supposed to be living in one state or the other of mental conditions that is not 100%. So just imagine the catalyzing effect of the floods on many people today. Many of us live in urban Nigeria, yeah, but don't also forget that a good number of us have relatives in the hinterlands and all. A sizable number of us have been indirectly affected as well. Data from the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Social and Disasters said that the flooding has affected something in the region of 3.2 million Nigerians as at the last count. Of course, we know the fatality figures are there. Many have been displaced. So share a thought. If your organization has a corporate social responsibility project, or you have a personal social responsibility project towards helping people, I think this is a good one that you should also go out to. Our job is to present the issues, let you know that the people need help, where they need help. Again, stick with Channels Television. You'll probably even find it on our website. That special report that we did on the flooding is there for you to see and know that these people really do need our help. So go ahead and reach out. Make a note somewhere, set an alarm or something to remind yourself it is something you need to give attention to. Well, I also suspect that in order to do that, you will need some money, right? I hope it's going to be done before the change of the Naira notes. Of course, you're aware of that as well, right? 200 Naira, 500 Naira, 1,000 Naira notes are going to change from December 15 by another 6 weeks or thereabouts. All other previous 1,000 Naira, 500 Naira, and 200 Naira notes will be out of use, they will not be legal tender anymore. You can't deceive anyone to say this is 500 Naira when we have a new, completely different looking 500 Naira note. So that is something you need to give attention to when the right time comes. Now, the interesting part of that is the conversation we're having between the CBN and the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, that they weren't consulted. The minister was not consulted. The ministry was not aware that such a thing was going to happen. If memory serves me right, I don't know how we can talk about the Central Bank of Nigeria without talking about finance. And because I thought that that was the purpose of banks, to finance projects. And the Central Bank is the governing bank of all banks in the country. So how it is possible for the Ministry of Finance to not know that the Central Bank of Nigeria is thinking about changing the notes beats me. The president got to know, but the minister didn't get to know. And so both of them are speaking differently. Look, you're supposed to know, you're not supposed to know, and all those things. Don't forget, in the back of that, remember that the federal government, the president, had said a few times, ministries, departments, and agencies should work together. Together. The vice president said, not once, not twice, that we need to have a marriage of fiscal and monetary policies, all in the same mix. And so exactly what is happening here? Who is the puppet? Who is the puppeteer? What exactly is happening such that the ministries, departments, and agencies are not working together? Just imagine the combustion system in your car and the wheels not agreeing. Just imagine it. Your gear and the wheels don't agree. The steering turns right. Your tires go left. Oh God, how are you going to drive? And we're wondering why we don't have development. I don't think we should wonder too much, should we? Do we have an idea? Okay, maybe I'm speaking a little too mundane. Maybe I don't know the politics of it or the facts of the issues, but what's in the news is what's in the news. Both say, well, the minister says she, who is supposed to be supervising all things finance all over Nigeria, isn't aware that the notes are going to change. More than a decade, Nigeria has had to deal with various security challenges over the years: insurgency, kidnapping, banditry, the works, ritual killings, outright armed robbery, farmer-herder clashes. It would seem like insecurity just shifts from time to time. And these have featured prominently with regularity in the country's domestic security calculus. And also, it's been said and written by many that our country's security needs to find a way to deal with all the things that we need to deal with. But add that to the mix. The US and UK issued those security advisories warning their own people in the country of an elevated risk of terror attacks in Abuja. Of course, following the alert, SSS, that's a state security service, advised Nigerians to remain calm but cautious. And of course, more foreign missions in Nigeria seem to have raised security alerts of an impending terrorist attack on the capital city, Abuja, in particular. The embassies of Denmark, Ireland, Bulgaria, Finland, and Germany in the capital have raised similar alerts following that of the US and UK, not forgetting, I think, Australia as well. This morning, let's have a conversation around that. implications and all, with Laddie Thompson, who, of course, has featured regularly here on our program. He's a security consultant, as well as Professor Ademola Abbas, who is a professor of international law and security analyst as well. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, let me begin with you, Pastor Thompson. Is this another, because you've said that over time, that as far as you're concerned, these insecurity issues are going to evolve, so to speak, from one thing to another if certain needful things are not done. So is this another of those phases, or this is just a one-off for some other reason it's not unknown in the schematics?
Well, thank you very much, Ayo. It's been quite a while. And I think you've got it spot on. For many years, I have said that when a doctor does not diagnose accurately, his prescriptions will keep being wrong. We've said this for more than 10 years, 15 now. We are dealing with a hydra, a shapeshifter, extremely intelligent. It wears a cover of religion, but actually it's a supremacist agenda that collapses nations from within. Now again, we're talking about the tribal advisory or something. I think the way we need to look at this is very simple. There's a Latin phrase, I think it's ignoratio elenchi. Ignoratio elenchi doesn't mean you are ignorant. It just means that you are ignoring refutation. It means you are missing the point. You see, all the hula baloo about the US tribal advisory is extremely misplaced, because Nigeria is yet to understand that strategy is what we need. Strategy is more important than power, is more important than your plan. The absence of a suitable strategy is the reason why our temperatures are raised like this from time to time. Look, travel advisories from the US and every other nation of the world are vectors that they normally use to project the fact that they have value to the worth of the lives of their citizens. So when we see, we receive an advisory like that, the lack of strategy. You see, I've always said this thing, and you will bear me witness. I've said this for more than 15 years here, and this thing is still going on. That there are four things basically that any nation uses to respond to this threat, to this hydra-headed monster that has moves in high places, infiltrates nations. It's very patient. It's extremely intelligent. It studies you, knows how to confuse you. And when it wants to collapse you finally, it knows when to move. Now, we continue to ignore that because I said, first of all, the military tactics has to change. A lot of the Nigerian generals are old school. We're talking about classmates, treaty of war. Those strategies cannot handle hybrid threats. Those are not strategies that you're going to use today for the war of narratives or the asymmetrical warfare that this hydra-headed war form uses. Secondly, you must have an ideology for your own nation that is a counter ideology to that which this threat is posing. Number three, you must have a value system that makes your citizens ready to, if need be, give up their lives to protect the state. And the fourth one, of course, is the fact that your architecture is thought. Look, when you face a global phenomenon with a local face, like what we are facing, you can't afford not to have your strategy in place. You can't afford to be a scatterbrain. You can't afford that ignoratio elenchi that I spoke about. If not, we know where this will end. I've been saying this over and over again, and the moment it shifts its ship, the moment it goes again, people panic. Now, take note of something I'm about to say to you right now. Nigerians have been bludgeoned with, with the whip of poverty. Poverty has been weaponized against the Nigerian, number one. Number two, whatever strategies these terrorists are using is succeeding. Nigerians are terrorized all over the country. The value of human worth has taken a dive. So, what am I trying to say to us here? It is time that we realize that it is the lack of a coherent, consistent strategy on the part of this government that makes it even look as if, I want to make a confession here, mathematization, like I said, of reality. If you look at the responses of Nigeria here, it is almost as if somebody in the setup of this nation's government is assisting the process, that displacement process that has been documented to be used by this Hydra. So you see, all that hullabaloo over the travel advisory is not the issue. The major issue is this. What is the structured response of Nigeria? You see, we are conditioned by reflex in Nigeria not to realize that there's a difference between when you respond to something and when you react to it. So everybody, in media inclusive, and this is a dangerous curve because this, shall I tell you the truth? We can beat this thing easily if we have the right strategy. But as long as we continue to do the wrong things step after step,
okay,
I don't think we're going to beat this thing.
Okay, you tell us more about that strategy, but let me ask Professor Abbas. When you say it's, sounds like you're saying that the advisories are a useless distraction to the issues. Professor Abbas, one of the issues that's been raised in the course of the week is that maybe there wasn't a security threat indeed. Maybe it was just something being said by some people to create certain, as Pastor Thompson put it, narratives concerning the country. So it sounds then that it's some kind of silent diplomatic row or tiff between nations and Nigeria or whatever it is. What do you make of all of this that is going on, especially from the diplomatic angle? What are the risks that could evolve from this?
Well, thank you very much, Ayo. Thanks for having me once again. Well, look, I heard what Mr. Wale Thompson said. Largely, I agree with most of the things he said, but I have a different take on, for instance, your question about the narrative being put out there, the advisory from the UK and US. Look, when things like this happen, let's first understand that we live in a very cynical country. And our political leadership has conditioned Nigerians to be very cynical, even among ourselves. Yesterday, you woke up to the CBN governor saying that we want to change the color of Naira and this and that. A day after, you have your Minister for Finance in the same cabinet, the same government, coming out and saying, we are not aware of that. And you had the CBN governor responding, saying, we don't need to tell anybody because we've got approval from the president. You're talking about this are just gibberish. All these compromise the legitimacy of the government. And when that happens, then citizens are free to begin to suspect what comes out of that particular government. Now, US, UK, and other Western countries have shown clearly, and I'm not referring to this particular advisory, that they take the life of their citizens far more importantly than the Nigerian government takes the life of its own citizens. So we know that. We don't need to go into that. Number two, it's very standard for any government to issue travel advisory to its citizens that, look, these are countries advised not to go to, except you have very essential businesses to do. That is to say, the government will be aware that you are there and this and that. So there's nothing untoward. There is nothing extraordinary in any government issuing the travel advisory to its own people. Let that get that one clear. But because we live in a system in which we have been conditioned to think otherwise. And by the way, Ayo, I am by no means being naive. I am not saying that, there cannot be circumstances that would go more than meet the eye. That is not what I'm saying here. But I'm saying, let's for once forget the messenger and focus on the message. And what is the message? The message is there is a threat to our country. Do we even need the US or UK to tell us there are threats to Nigerian security system? We live with threats every single day. It is possible that the level of intelligence that we do in Nigeria here is not up to the level of other people who are supposed to be our partners. So there's nothing wrong in them in saying, look, I'm advising my citizens not to go to this particular country or to be careful when they go to this country. Now, it's a different argument, and I do understand the sensitivity of Nigerian government. If the government says, look, we understand, but you should be talking to us. Don't forget, 2 days before US issued that advisory to Nigeria, they did the same thing to South Africa. South Africans did not argue that they shouldn't have done that. They said, you should have come and discussed the threat with us before you went public. That is a very intelligent response to do. So let us try to separate all this thing from, you're going to have conspiracy theories, elections are coming and this and that. Look, I read yesterday overnight, somebody said, they wanted to change this, what is it called? This threat is because US also has been fingered in the theft of Nigerian oil and blah, blah, blah. Now they are raising this issue. All this is nonsense. We know as Nigerians, our oil is being stolen. How do we live in a country in which we're not talking about needles, we're talking about trucks, we're talking about massive ships cut oil out of this country? We were in the same country a week ago when they discovered a particular point when this oil was being this and that, was being trafficked, and immediately the place went on fire. Are we investigating the person? Are we investigating all those things? The essence of things that we have become very, very despondent, and quite rightly so, in the political leadership of this country. So therefore, anything that comes from their mouth, we do not trust. And let us pay attention very, very carefully to the message that is coming from other parts who are involved in it, and not necessarily the messenger. I think for me, that is my initial take on this.
Well, Prof, before I go back to Pastor Thompson, speak to this other angle of something that came up in the course of the week while we discussed along this line, the issue of security education of Nigerians. Look, at the end of the day, I mean, the discordant tunes coming from governments, ministries, departments, and agencies at all levels, there are those who would say it makes the country even more vulnerable. When there is no cohesiveness among those who are supposed to be working together to secure Nigerians, there is a problem that the people themselves have to deal with. How significant is that in the scheme of things? I mean, you just cited just one instance between the Minister of Finance and the CBN governor, who are all in the finance industry of the country. The supervisor of the industry, if I can put it in that term, would be the Minister of Finance. But anyway, that's just one of the issues. Another one that is similar is that in giving humanitarian aids to victims of flooding, we know that Naira is doing something in collaboration with the Nigeria Air Force. But then we also know that the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs is doing something altogether differently. And they're both government agencies, federal government agencies. In that same space, look at the challenges of cohesion between security forces at various levels. And the president himself has spoken to that. How well or not they are, synergizing to deal with the security challenges are, it's another kettle of fish altogether. So speak to the cohesiveness of operations of government agencies, because there are those who will wonder, how can we make the kind of significant progress we want to make if government agencies that are supposed to be like an engine are working, the radiator is working differently from the wiper water supply, working differently from the exhaust and all of those things. So we may not be able to have the kind of progress that we need to have as a nation, and it puts the people at risk, doesn't it? Pastor Thompson, if you listen to that question, could you please go ahead and attempt to look at it yourself?
Yes, I've said to us that there needs to be what we call the mathematization of inquiry. If we look at the performance of this government in the response to this Hydra-headed terror threat, what comes out when you crunch numbers is that it seems that some elements within the government, most within, are working together with this agenda to collapse this country from within. And I'm saying this with all seriousness because from the policies of so-called absorbing terrorists who are captured, so-called debriefing, so-called, I don't know what process they developed in Nigeria that is not existent anywhere else in the world, and absorbing them into the Nigerian army to demoralize our people, to the lack of interagency cooperation that you're talking about, it is deliberate. Now, if there's anything apart from that, you will find out that a lot of policies, look at the central bank policies you're talking about, while there may be nothing wrong with it in terms of strategy, in terms of timing, I mean, these are things that if they had come up 4, 5 years, 6 years ago, you would say there's somebody who's doing something. But obviously, the strategic response of this country shows clearly. I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. There are mosques in high places in Nigeria. And what is happening to our people is that when terrorism is being used clinically, one of its objectives is to break the will of the nation. Now, if you look at the value of human worth all over Nigeria, it is as if somebody deliberately is fomenting trouble. And my appeal to the nation is this: we are Nigeria. We are a country designed by God to be the giant of Africa, and we will fulfill our role. Whatever this threat is, we will beat it. There are two things that have been working for us so far that has not allowed this nation to collapse. The amount of blunders in terms of the response of the government that have been committed regularly, and I speak as a person who has worked with the victims, people whose lives have been affected. I'm talking about widows, I'm talking about orphans, I'm talking about people who have been maimed, people who have had problems. I've been around this country, I've been in places where the bombs are still smoking. By the time I get there, for us to start doing our work of relief. Now, let me tell you something. We will beat this thing. But for us to beat it, the whole nation needs to understand something. This strategy that this government is putting together has not worked. It is not working. The other day I was on Channels TV, I pointed out that in high places there are known terrorists with global reputation who are serving in high places. How do we defend this kind of things? And who says that we don't understand that the process that is going on? Let me tell you something about Abuja. While I say that we cannot put our attention on travel advisories for foreign nations, does not mean that the intel that is coming that has allowed so many nations at the same time to come to a conclusion should be ignored. More so, if any one of us who works in the fields of missions and others put your ear to the ground, the charter is there. Abuja is a matter of time. Abuja is a matter of time if we don't change strategies. Okay. There are some things we need to do right away. First of all, as I'm talking to you right now, if in a matter of days, we don't deploy low-tech devices in Abuja, and we continue with the responses, the people I feel sorry for the most are the young boys in the army. People who have been sent out to defend a nation that is being disabled from within. We have the records are there for anybody to see. We don't have to look. As a matter of fact, let me say something to you clearly. When the template for the program that is destroying Nigeria, a globally recognized program, when the template was being developed between 1990 and 1996, now people say, oh, how do you know this? Look, go and look at the 9/11 official report, page 56 or so. You will see in about 4 pages, you'll see Nigeria mentioned. you will find out that a lot of the templates that is working here are things that were discussed even then, and that if we dig enough, we'll find out that even the names of the people involved is not hidden. Now, let me tell you something. In the early days in the 70s, when armed robbery first started, the government made an example of some people, and every Nigerian, the narrative shifted. Nobody really wanted to be an armed robber. Now, if you look at most of the people sponsoring terrorism and everything, all the information comes into Nigeria, the government sits on it, makes noises, makes promises. Like the other day, they said that one of the heaviest financiers was in Kaduna State, and the governor made that comment himself. I'm asking you till today, have you seen any financier that has been tried publicly, whose name has been made known?
It's very interesting, Pastor Johnson, that these things are coming up, thick and fast. But I don't know. Let me speak to Professor Abbas. You wanted to answer the question about discordance within the system earlier.
Yeah, Ayo, apologies for that. Nigeria just happened to me. Nigeria happens to us at every stage. Internet. Anyway, I'm back now. Look, I just took what Wale just said there in terms of, I think he began by saying that he thought that the incoherence is deliberate. Well, it may be partially so, but I wouldn't even think it's necessarily deliberate. I think this is a government that from day one has been signposted by a lot of inconsistencies. And we can chart from 2015. We can have a long chart of inconsistencies in government policies. I think CBN is a perfect example of that. If you look at what Mr. Emefiele, I don't know what it's called nowadays. If you chart what he has done in the last few years, you can see a lot of inconsistencies in the policies. But what actually is mind-boggling to me is that at that level of CBN governorship and the ministerialship of the country, you have that kind of discord. It might be symptomatic of something far more fundamental, dysfunctionality in that particular system itself. Certainly, Mr. President must be watching both of them. We're not talking about opposition parties here. We're talking about the same government. We're not talking about PDP saying this against this. We're talking about very high level officials. I think about 2 days ago, just last night, I think earlier in the day, on Friday, Paul Pelosi was attacked in the US, as you know, the husband of the Speaker of the US Congress, was attacked brutally in his house in California. And what is important was you have the whole country saying there should be a bipartisan condemnation of the level of violence in that country. And we've seen Republicans, sort of dance around and stuff like that, this and that. But you know what, they still come out and say, when we have this kind of level of inconsistency in the country, who calls anybody out? Nobody does. Who calls the government out? Nobody does. Both parties leadership should come out and say, look, we cannot tolerate this. We're talking about, let's not take this Naira issue. We're talking about a currency. It's a very, very sensitive issue. So you will assume that everybody will come out and say, no, we cannot have this level of discord in this particular government, or in any government for that matter. Let us know why this is taking place. And as I said, it might be symptomatic of what is going on. Now, let's look at this issue of security itself. Again, Wale said many things in terms of, inconsistent policy or lack of strategy. I think we have a strategy in Nigeria, only that the strategy is blatantly ineffective. And I agree with you to some extent in terms of, the kind of military we have. There is no way you can use old solutions to tackle new problems. We have new problems in terrorism today, cyber terrorism and so many other. There are new issues that developed in the last 10, 20, 30 years. You cannot use a military that is using a manual or 70 years old manual to respond to the same thing. You have to make a long-term investment in security, in intelligence gathering. I'm not talking about just buying a few old, useless, helicopters from some third world or second world countries and buying a few Tornado, whatever you want to say. That doesn't solve. Look, that is a militarized solution. The solution to Nigeria's security has to go way, way beyond the military, point blank. Are we looking at the root causes? We talk about this as if they're just things we want to tick box. No, we need to understand that in a country in which we are approaching an unprecedented level of unemployment in the country, you're going to have problems. you're going to have serious, serious problems. So let us look at what are the foundational bases for the crisis that we face today. Number two, Nigeria's policy is extremely reactive. We wait, something happens, and we react to it. Look, the other day, about 3 weeks ago, you might be aware, just about 5 a.m. On Kara area, when you are approaching Baga, there was a blatant armed robbery there. And immediately, as typical of Nigeria, they brought in soldiers, they brought in police and everything. And I just laughed and I told my friends, give it 4 or 5 days, they will disappear. That is us. It's a problem, we just respond, then we forget it. And I like what Wally said there. There's a difference between response and reacting to a problem. You know, I send troops, I put boots on Abuja. I'm not in Abuja today, but I'm sure that in Abuja now you see soldiers on the street. I can imagine you see a lot of police points and this and that and blah, 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 this and that. Give it 1 or 2 weeks. All this will disappear and we go back to it. So if I were a terrorist who wants to really harm you, I know what your response is going to be. I will just wait you out. I'm not going to come out because I know you're going to put boots on the street. Only idiots function like that. You need to make long-term investment in intelligence gathering, in equipping your military. And by equipping, you're talking about modern-day equipment. You have to invest massively in technology. You're not talking about, AK-47, AK-49. That is not the kind of level we should be dealing with now. Spend more. Look, Ayo, I've said this several times on Channel TV. London is the CCTV capital of the world. Everybody knows. At a point in time, if you left your house in London at 9 a.m. and you went back at 5 p.m., you will be caught by CCTV 350 times per day in a single day. I'm talking about 10 years ago. I don't even want to imagine what the statistics are now. And that is why if there is bombing in London today, within a few minutes, they will profile, they know who causes it, who is responsible, because reaction is different. Reaction is what you do. Response is long-term. Response is something that continues. So you can still be responding to a threat for the next 3 years, 5 years after the threat, because it's a long chain that you are plotting. It's not reaction. Reaction is just like send it, but all Nigerians do most of the time is just to react. We never respond. And that is what happens when everybody should be in prison is in government, and everybody is in government should be in prison. Nigeria is a perfect example of that.
All right, well, Prof, I don't know, but first, just to quickly point out that Wally Thompson is a musician. Our guest is Laddie Thompson. I'm sorry. It's just okay, so let me go to Laddie Thompson now for this one. And both of you are going to speak to this as we close. Someone mentioned the issue of security education for Nigerians. Pastor Thompson, we know what government needs to do. Whether or not it is timeless enough, that's another thing altogether. But how about the people? Someone pointed out yesterday to us that the level of security education of Nigerians is very, very low. How do we begin the process of redressing that? Let the people be security educated and be able to take first aid action when it be.
Well, let me say that is the simplest part of the problem, and I will tell you why. We have an existential threat from the global, the local face of a global threat on one hand. It is exploiting systemic flaws that have never been addressed. Systemic flaws that Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa spoke about in 1960 on the 7th of October. Now, for the people, when you want to win this kind of war, you're going to galvanize the entire nation. Now, fortunately for us, those who designed Nigeria, in order to keep us failing without falling, designed Nigeria in such a way that the enculturation program that produces a Nigerian out of a baby is weaker than the enculturation program that produces an Igbo man, a Yoruba man, an Efik man, a Hausa man, and a Fulani man out of a baby. However, we need to turn that thing on its head and use it for advantage. Right now, we don't have the luxury of time. We don't have the luxury to go borrowing more money. And I'm going to say to you right now that practically every culture in Nigeria has a low-tech form of an internet. that is not powered by bytes and digital energy. What I'm trying to point out to you is this. I have been discussing with some people in, I think, one of the bodies in Nigeria, the NIPR, yes, the NIPR. I was at their convention and we spoke about the fact that these are communicators. These are the kind of bodies that you energize in a country. Do you know that if you design an app that people download on their phones, that app designed on the skeletal structure of the enculturation programs will produce in 2 weeks a stronger line of defense than anything the country has done since we started. First, let me tell you something. What we are seeing in Nigeria is just the advanced party of this hydra-headed monster. This is not their most sophisticated weapons coming in yet. What we are seeing that is giving us headache in Nigeria right now is just their advanced formations, which are not the deadliest at all. Okay? We can take these things out. Develop, look, an app, we've been trying to put something together for a while right now. Develop this app, go down to regional security level, engage the African advantage. Listen, in other parts of the world, it takes a nuclear family to bring up a child. One of the ancient advantages of Africa is that it takes an entire community to bring up a child. And while we are doing that, you find out there are certain bonds that are forged in practically every community.
Okay.
If you put that on a digital plate,
yeah,
you're going to find you have a stronger line of defense. You have a pool of information. The only challenge here now is this. Even if we go low tech, what guarantee do you have that when you make a report to those who are licensed to carry ammunition,
solid
they won't
question
come back and devastate the community?
Solid question there. Solid question there. Professor Abbas, same question. How do you react to that? Because there are those who will be wondering, so security education is a challenge on its own.
Well, thank you, Ayo. I think that is a very important question. I seem to remember in days bygone that compulsory military training was part of our... Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Compulsory military training was part of our system in Nigeria. I think at the NYC level, at a point in time, it was taken off. Number one, you need to educate the majority of Nigerians to be security awareness. Earlier on, I think Mr. Ladi mentioned something that, you know, we need to have Nigerians need to be patriotic about their country. Look at the war going on in Ukraine. Whereas Russians are fleeing Russia, not to be conscripted, Ukrainians overseas are flying back to Ukraine to go and fight and die for their country. You know what that is? The biggest investment you can make in people is in their own life. And when you invest in the people, they'll have a stake in your life. It's as simple as ABC. How many Nigerians today have a stake in Nigeria's life as a country? How many of us want to die for our country? So the kind of education we are looking for is been missing fundamentally from day one. And you cannot that education when you have a political leadership that does not even understand what being a citizen of a country truly actually means. Most Nigerians today are struggling for daily survival. So you need education. I won't just limit to security, but if you say security education, are you talking about, you know, teach them, train people on how to handle arms, how to report security and this and that? No, all this must form an integral part of a whole citizenry education of the country. Well, that is educating us, what does it mean to be a Nigerian?
Yeah.
When can I say I am a patriotic Nigerian? How can I be sure that if it comes to it, I want to take arm and fight and die for my country? It means my country must have invested in me to that level that I will be very proud to wear my country's flag. That's the kind of education you're talking about in the country. One second, Ayo. But if you're talking about a country that woke up one day and took history away from our education syllabus, what are we talking about?
Okay, they are very concerning issues. There is no doubt about it. But even though the security education that I was talking about is people even being able to identify what a security threat is, many may not even know. It's one of the things that we have seen. But however, I think you made a very, very valid sense in saying, look, we need to address these issues more concisely than we are already doing now. I have to thank you, gentlemen, for being a part of this conversation this morning. Professor Ademola Abbas is a professor of international law and global security, as well as a global security analyst. As we've also had Pastor Laddie Thompson, who is a security consultant. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time this morning, which we greatly value.